Chapter 14.
"You're taking Sunday off, Fraser," Pitbull had said when she'd phoned him on her way back from the bunkhouse. "And if you can't find another reason, just take it I'm not signing off on the overtime. Do something nice, have some family time or whatever."
"With the best will in the world, sir, a day's not really enough to get me to the Isle of Mull and back."
"Wish I had that excuse," Pitbull had said. "We've got the mother-in-law for Sunday lunch. The team will still be busy, digging through those phone records. Good find, by the way."
Although she hadn't found it, of course. The boy, Joe Ingalls, had. He of the inscrutable face and few words. She'd got nothing out of him when he'd shown her up the track to Marianne Leonard's cottage and pointed out the clump of bracken where the phone had lain. Pitbull had said it didn't need sealing off as a crime scene and told her to conduct a fingertip search instead.
"Get Corby in if necessary and take some photos."
For all they knew, the phone had fallen from the girl's pocket when she'd been running. Anyway, countless people might have been up and down that track since Wednesday. It wasn't the approach Fraser would have taken if she'd been SIO. She'd have had a forensic team going over that section of the track with a fine-toothed comb, but she could see Pitbull's point. It had taken the forensic unit the best part of 48 hours to complete their search of the Devil's Pool Valley, and they'd found nothing of significance. Broken reeds which could as easily have resulted from a fall as a struggle, though at least a struggle would have explained why her shoe had come off. A soggy bus ticket from the Shropshire Hills Explorer, several weeks old. A snag of dark fabric fibres, which most likely came from a waterproof jacket, but might also have come from a bag or waterproof trousers. The pathologist had concluded that a rock had been the most likely murder weapon, but no blood-stained stone had lain conveniently nearby. Why would it have? Any murderer with any sense would have let it sink to the bottom of the pool. She hadn't asked Corby in, but had donned a scene suit and sectioned the bracken patch herself, extending her grid a few feet on each side into the undergrowth and across the shingle path. Darkness was falling by the time she had finished. Marianne Leonard's dogs had surprised her, running up the path ahead of their owner. Seeing Fraser in her white scene suit, the centre manager had stopped dead, then given a nervous laugh. "You might have warned me you were up here. Gave me the fright of my life."
"Sorry, lost track of time. Are you finished with the evening meal already?"
"Why, were you hoping to scrounge some?" She didn't like the word scrounge, but besides that, the woman had read her intentions well. Back in Shrewsbury, it would be late-night Weetabix or beans on toast. "I wanted to apologise for earlier anyway," Marianne said. "I was a bit stressed. Nothing to bother you with, but—" She held out a plastic food container. "I have some of tonight's supper here if you want to join me. Goulash, vegetarian." It had beaten Weetabix and baked beans hands down, and Fraser had stayed far longer than she should have done. Shaky procedure, of course, sharing supper with at the very least a witness and possibly a suspect, but she might have argued that Pitbull had charged her with liaison, and contrary to his opinion, she believed that talking to people was still a good way to solve crimes. Data trawling had its place, of course, but humans, rather than computers, committed crimes. It had been almost 10 when her car had pulled into Shrewsbury's Abbey Foregate. As well as supper, she had met the donkeys, Bill and Ted, Josephine the goat, and Hamish the pony. She knew little more of the centre manager's personal history than she had before, but it had felt as though barriers had lowered by a millimetre or two whilst they ate. Marianne had told her of Lucy's upset earlier. The girl hadn't tried to contact Fraser herself, which was interesting and would require her to follow up. And she had shed light on the other players. Roger Taylor and Donald McIntyre, Wiltshire Sam, 3 men who had known the girl or at least met her and had denied all knowledge of her. Marianne had been adamant that she did not remember Anna Price. "If I'd met her, or spoken to her when she was still alive, maybe I'd have remembered her. As it is, I don't. It was a long time ago and I have a lot of guests here." Fraser had driven away, replete with goulash, apple crumble, and a searing coffee which had then kept her awake half the night. Unless it was the evening's conversation and company, innocent in itself, but tantalising. Marianne Leonard interested her, but exactly why she was not sure. Perhaps it was nothing more than her own inability to bypass a mystery. The woman had a story, and, Just as she had picked scabs as a child, though counselled by adults not to, here were loose threads that demanded unravelling. West Mercia Police HQ was at Hindlip Hall, a once stately home near Worcester, rumoured to have played a crucial role in both the Babington and gunpowder plots, though Fraser had yet to verify the truth of this. Rather than take Sunday off, she drove the 50 miles down through Bridgnorth and Kidderminster and made a nuisance of herself with D.S. Chowdhury, getting herself up to speed with the autopsy and forensic reports.
"Still pretty limited," Chowdhury had said. "You won't get anything else on a Sunday, but the basics are there. No murder weapon, no scene evidence of use, only the pathologist's opinion it was murder."
"You don't think it was?" Fraser said. Chowdhury shrugged.
"Not paid to think, am I?"
Fraser hoped he was joking, and the grimace that followed the words implied he might be.
"Case to investigate anyway," the DS went on. "Just would be better if there was some more concrete evidence. The phone will make things easier, and we've got some intel on the car. I'll ping it across."
About bloody time, too. Given that it was their most obvious lead, she'd found the lack of progress in locating its owner frustrating. Circumstantial evidence suggested that Anna Price and a man, possibly her boyfriend, had arrived at the foot of Perkins Beach in a red Ford Fiesta. Neither she nor the man had been seen since, and the car was still in the lane. Which was odd in itself. If the boyfriend was the man who had been with her, where had he been since? Why had he not reported her missing? Why had he not returned for his car? And if he too was missing, why had no one reported it? Fraser clicked on the link and opened the file. Forensics had taken the car to pieces and found precisely nothing of value, apart from Anna Price's going-away bag. What you might expect. Clothes suitable for walking, toiletries, a novel. Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters. Nothing to hint at who her companion had been. Trace evidence awaited confirmation. Hair, sweat secretions, even a broken fingernail, suggesting that Anna Price had been a frequent passenger but was unlikely to have driven the vehicle. In the door compartments were sweet wrappers and a couple of parking tickets for the car parks in Church Stretton and Craven Arms, and a set of service books was in the glove box, along with a box of tissues and some sugar-free gum. The car was clean and tidy, but not suspiciously so, unless one subscribed, as Pitbull apparently did, to the theory that all young men were slovenly. Chowdhury disagreed. His car was immaculate, and he cleaned it inside and out every time he had a day off. The carpet in the boot of the Ford Fiesta showed traces of mud, still to be analysed, and marks left by walking boots, and there was a first aid kit stuffed behind a piece of webbing over one of the wheel arches. The spare wheel and jack were unused.
"Registered to a John Davis?"
Chowdhury said, clearly happy to be diverted from the calls he was making to Anna Price's colleagues, trying to glean information on the girl's private life. Once private. The right to privacy evaporated after a suspicious death. Fraser scrolled down through the file. John Davis, of 7A Marshbrook Crescent in Craven Arms, quite close to Church Stretton if Fraser's newly gained sense of geography was accurate, about 15 minutes south on the A49.
"What do we know about him?"
Fraser asked. Any answer that he gave her was, she supposed, to be found in the file, but she found how people summarised information, selecting which bits they gave importance, interesting. And she could always read the file once Chowdhury had given her his impressions.
"Well, he's got a record,"
Chowdhury said. Fraser's interest flared and Chowdhury grinned.
"Yeah, don't get excited. Not much use to us. Teen stuff. Well, pre-16. Shoplifting and bit of antisocial behaviour. Couple of cautions. Supervised community service. Was in the Worcester area then, but must have calmed down a bit because nothing since 2015. Links to social services say he was in care, but he disappears off the system in 2016.
Presumably when he was 16, old enough to be turned loose into the world to take care of himself.
Neighbours in the upstairs flat say he's all right, Chowdhury went on. Quiet, keeps himself to himself. No problems with him. Bit boring, they said. Goes to work every day and usually not around on weekends. They don't know what he does. Office job of some sort.
And the holiday?
They didn't know where. He put a note through their door asking them to put the bins out this week. Took Wuff one morning with a backpack. One of them reckoned he'd mentioned wanting to go to Costa Rica, but she didn't know if that was his holiday or something for the future.
Another dead end, thought Fraser. Did the neighbours recognise Anna?
Never seen her. Knew nothing about a girlfriend. They said he was sometimes away overnight, but they didn't know if it was work or play. We're cross-referencing to find out where he works, but it might take a while.
What about the head teacher? Or Anna's work friends? Does anyone recognise his name? Chowdhury looked regretfully at the phone on his desk.
Not so far. Her colleagues say she was hush-hush about the boyfriend. They even wondered if she might be dating a married man. Had been seeing him a while, but none of them have ever met him. Never been to work functions or anything. Weird.
On her way to the canteen, Fraser drew spider diagrams in her mind. Names and places, times and dates, linked by intersecting red lines. Donald McIntyre, Roger Taylor, Wiltshire Sam, Joe Ingalls. He'd found the phone, would be the right age for the owner of the red car, and the name he'd given at the bunkhouse might have been a fabrication. Too tanned for an office worker, though, and the neighbours would have mentioned those weird eyes. Fraser made a note to prompt Pitbull's team to dig into Joe Ingalls' past. Maybe they would find a link to John Davis.
Mr. Call,
Chowdhury said as she put a strong Americano down on his desk and repaired to the one she'd commandeered with an oat milk cappuccino. Or capote-chino, as the canteen menu listed it. She picked up her phone and, seeing an unknown number in her missed calls, dialed her voicemail with a hint of anticipation. Not Marianne Leonard's. Fraser had saved her number. Lucy Hawkins had left a message, hesitant and inarticulate. Probably nothing, but I wondered if... I wanted to tell you something. If you could call me? Fraser tapped the phone against her chin thoughtfully before returning the call. It rang for some time before going to voicemail. Not Lucy's voice, but an impersonal, robotic answering service. Fraser left a message saying that she was available all day and would try to call again later. And if she didn't get hold of Lucy, well, maybe she could drop into the bunkhouse on her way home. Not that it was on her way, of course, but still. Not too far out of it. An imagined scent of baking pricked at her nostrils. She might even be asked in for a cup of tea and some banana bread if she played her cards right.